So, hello, Chris. Can you hear me now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, fantastic. I can hear you very well. Great sound. And I heard that, yeah, your colleagues around you with you now. Yeah,
Yes, we'll have them introduce themselves.
yeah, let's.
This is Jeff, the bass player.
Hello.
Paul Eric, the singer, and Mark Evans, the drummer.
Perfect. I heard you will go on tour now, so you're rehearsing for your forthcoming tour.
Yes, we're doing 5 or 6 quick shows as kind of a warm-up here in the Midwest and Northeast of the United States before we decide to really get serious and come up with some touring plans.
That's good. Is Europe on the touring schedule as well?
No, we don't have anything mapped out just yet. As you know, the album just came out 2 or 3 weeks ago, and
Yeah.
and we're talking to a few promoters and people to see if we can get on some tour that brings us over to Europe and Germany, of course.
Yeah, this would be good to present you here in Germany. I guess you did a tour with Dream Theaters decades ago.
Correct. That was in 1999.
Oh.
And actually, Jeff and I just visited with the Dream Theater guys here in Detroit a couple days ago, and maybe we can talk them into putting us on a show or two.
Hmm. Yeah, this would be a good idea. So, yeah, the new album, Pretending to Run. The old question, what's the thematical concept? Is there a thematical concept behind, or how would you see it? Chris, you are the main lyricist, I guess.
Yeah, the other guys simply refused to write lyrics, so they forced me into a corner. But anyway, yeah, we decided early on that kind of the next step in our evolution or something that caught our attention was to do an actual story. And some of that was kind of coincidentally, I was writing lyrics as I do kind of off and on anyway. And they all kind of started revolving around this one storyline. And it's really about an individual who experiences a traumatic event and has to kind of pick up the pieces of his life and carry on. So Pretending to Run really reflects the fact that, you know, these types of things are a struggle. Mm-hmm. And as we join our central character at the very start of the album, all of this has already happened to him, and he's kind of in the aftermath of his situation and beginning his journey toward recovery, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And so Pretending to Run is really just about false starts or persisting even though you may not be reaching your goal right away. So it's a combination of persistence and being able to find your way even though maybe you have some false starts and you have setbacks. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the whole album is the central character's journey on that quest, you know, to kind of come to grips with what's happened to him and find his way forward.
And is it autobiographical as well?
Well, there's always a little autobiographical in the stuff that I write. So, yeah, some experiences that I had kind of formed some of the basis for that. But, you know, it's a lot of what I witness around me. And then, of course, there's some fiction. You know, I wouldn't expect anything in my life to be interesting enough to turn into an actual autobiographical lyric. But certainly there's lots of different influences that went in to inform the whole Pretending to Run story.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's obvious there are many guest musicians involved on this new opus. So how hard was it to bring them all together? How hard was it to bring it into this project?
Well, I'll let some of my bandmates interject here. You know, logistically, it was challenging, but I'll let Jeff talk about how we went ahead and got some guys like Adam Holtzman and Colin Edwin into the picture.
Yeah, Colin and Edwin, we were playing a show in Chicago, a big progressive rock festival, and while we were there, Adam was doing a solo set of his instrumental work, and Colin was there as part of another project. And as we were there, we just got to talking to them and asked them if they would be interested in bringing their unique talent to another project, and seeing if they would be interested in playing on our album. And we talked to them a little bit more about it while we were there, and they both agreed that they would be interested in hearing it and seeing what they could bring to it. And obviously Adam brings Taken by Surprise. He brings a lot of organ, a lot of keyboard work, but he did a lot of the in-between instrumental work in between songs, the music that ties a lot of songs together. And that's more from his instrumental type work, his soundscapes that he does. And Colin added some really nice textures to a couple different songs on Pretending to Run. And that's really how it happened. It was just simple conversations at a show, and they were interested in doing it.
Oh,
And this is Mark. Bringing Ian Anderson on, he's always enjoyed our music, and we know his publicist, Dan Layton. And over the years, we've been trying to get him to participate on a Tiles album, but logistics and scheduling just never worked out. And finally, he was kind enough to do the flute work on Pretending to Run, and just knocked it out of the park.
But Alex Lifeson was not available this time.
Well, yeah, Alex, and it was. I thought more Rush fans would kind of pick up on Alex playing on Flypaper, because it was the first time that anyone in Rush had worked with Terry, the original producer, on, I guess, what I would consider their best albums. But we did actually ask him, and they were busy with the Clockwork Angels project and tour. And there was one brief moment when it looked like he might have a chance, but it fell through. So, yeah, we did go back and see if Alex was available. But we had kind of put out a lot of feelers, and mainly because as we were in the arrangement process, our goal for this album was to make it as big and expansive as we possibly could, So that meant string quartets, and that meant the 25-piece choir. We didn't force all of this stuff in, but as we wanted to build up the arrangements, the songs themselves kind of gave us ideas on what can happen. And I'll let Paul talk a little bit about some of the special guests that helped with the vocals, because being almost 100 minutes long, and because our character, is floating in from third-person perspective to first person, we used our friend Matthew Parmenter on some vocals, and Mark Michael, who also is a friend of ours from the area, to help with the vocal arrangements and do a little bit of the vocals themselves. So, but, I think Paul can explain a little bit more about how that worked out.
Yeah, as far as the vocal arrangements, and both working with Matthew Parmenter and Mark Michael, they're both quality, super high quality vocalists, and they both have completely different tones to their voices. So they come up with a lot of different arrangements, different backing vocal styles, and to be able to add layers and textures, which just fill in so much more with the music. It made everything fun to do. The spontaneity, the pace, which was worked at, it really turned out well. Adding a lot and mixing in with the rest of the music, and really turned out terrific.
Oh yeah, and so you have got many people involved, and just so how long did it take to record this long opus? Was it just the aspect of a few weeks, or did you work a long time on this new double album?
As far as the vocals, recording just the vocals, or the whole project?
Yeah, the whole project, because there are many people involved. It's very complex music, so it would be interesting to know how long did it take? Songwriting, yeah, composing, rehearsing, and recording.
This project from start to finish it was at least a couple of years.
Ah, yeah.
Okay, we're going 4 years now.
Because it's a long time, 8 years, 8 year break. So it took quite a few years to create this album.
Right. There's a lot. Everybody's got families and obligations that they have to take care of, and to line people up and to line studios up and to work with the songs and then rework with the songs. Everything just takes a little time, and in the long run, it turns into a better project.
Of course.
So what ended up happening was we probably wrote the album. It took us about 2 years to get it to where we were really happy with everything. Then obviously we've been pretty open that it didn't start out as a double album. It started out as, actually it was under a different name, but it was like a big 20-minute song years and years ago. And when we kind of set it aside and did Flypaper, and when we came back after Flypaper, we really liked that what we had, that 20 minutes, and as we started working on it, it grew into the one album. And when we were finished with, I think we had, 50 minutes of music, the story wasn't really done, and it grew into another CD. But the great thing about it is that because it did take us a long time to find our way and to get things finished, that's what allowed for a lot of these special guests to be on there, because we didn't have a strict deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And because things were taking a while, we were able to wait for Ian, and we were able to wait for certain people that we had, like Mike Stern, to come in, and for those types of people to come in. And as the project grew, it just expanded our time. But also the downside is our fans had to wait longer, and that was the downside. But we waited and thought, if what we give them in our head, if we heard this great album and this great story, and we thought it was worth the risk of waiting that long, and we're really happy with how it turned out.
Yes, of course. So it was not intended to be a double album. It just worked out as a double album.
Right. We kept adding some songs as we developed the story more and more, and suddenly we found ourselves at 75 minutes. And I personally was able to convince the other guys that I'm not a big fan of one CD that's packed with 80 minutes of music. I think from a listener you get tired and you never really can listen to the whole thing. So because we had been writing so many songs, we had a lot at our disposal. So we decided, well, why don't we, because it's a concept album, why don't we consider making 2 45 or 2 50-minute albums? Because we really only needed another 20 minutes from that 75.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we could split it in two. And as you hear the album, you can see really what a lucky break that was, because the second disc could start out with Midwinter, which is kind of a reprise of the song Pretending to Run itself. And it also, like Jeff said, it also gave us a chance to really kind of look through our little black book of musician friends, not just some well-known people, but guys from around town to help us with percussion and saxophone. But also, as we added the songs, then we went and asked Mike Portnoy, because we had been friends with all the Dream Theater guys since we did the tour with them. And we had the couple songs we were adding, and it gave Mike a chance to go ahead and contribute. Because we, like Mark said about Ian Anderson, we had been after some of these guys to do us the favor of guesting on our album. And so finally the stars aligned with Mike Portnoy, and he was also interested, as we were, in his son Max, who's in an excellent kind of progressive metal band, Next to None. And so I was able to go to the Portnoy studios for a weekend and get Max and Mike to not only plan a song together, but each of them did an individual song. And again, we didn't just look at this stuff so that we could coattail on their name recognition. These are friends of ours, and as we looked at keeping somebody's interest for almost 100 minutes, besides the vocal changes that we were able to arrange, we also could have a little bit of a different drum feel or a little different guitar solo with Mike Stern and Kim Mitchell, who did some guest solos. So all of us in the band kind of relinquished what it was that we normally bring in order to let these special guests kind of come in and collaborate with us.
So you mentioned Ian Anderson and the song Midwinter. I think we should have a break, listen to this song Midwinter, and then we continue the interview, so hold the line. What can you say about this song Midwinter and the collaboration with Ian Anderson?
Well, Midwinter is, because throughout the whole album you'll hear little recurring musical themes, and Midwinter is simply a variation on the song Pretending to Run that Jeff and his friend Matt Cross, who actually was in a pretty well-known band for a while, Orange 9mm, they came up with those basic loops and that ostinato bass pattern. And as we split the whole album in two, it made a natural break, and so we could kind of start everybody back off on the same footing, but farther down in the storyline where our central character is kind of at the midpoint of the story. And so it's a different song, but you'll obviously hear that there's the basic musical parts are the same as the song Pretending to Run. And then, of course, later on disc 2, we reprise Pretending to Run itself in a couple short moments. But Ian Anderson had first become aware of us on the Presence of Mind album when we shared the same publicist at the time. And he was nice enough to give us a quote because he really liked Presence of Mind. And like Mark said, ever since then, we had hoped that someday we could hook up with Ian and have him do one of his iconic and instantly identifiable flute solos. So Midwinter provided that great opportunity for him to go ahead and improvise for a couple minutes there at the end of the song, which really the sound of the flute and the string arrangements that our friend Mark Michael contributed to. Really, I think as an Ian Anderson and Jethro Tull fan, I had to kind of pinch myself that such a thing was actually becoming a reality, because emailing Ian Anderson and having him ask questions where the downbeat of the song was a pretty exciting time for sure.
Okay, hold the line. We play Midwinter, from your new album, Pretending to Run, and we continue the interview in a few minutes. Dwight, hello guys, can you hear me?
Hello! Yeah, hello!
Long time not heard from you. Yeah, interesting to see. Yeah, you told that you have worked with Terry Brown. He is a legendary producer of Rush. So how important was he for the whole work?
Oh, it was extremely important. We worked with Terry in the past. He's like the fifth member of the band. He really is. He brings a lot to the table, just his experience, not only with Rush, but he's an entire encyclopedia of rock and roll going back to bands like The Who. He just brings such knowledge and always there to give his 2 cents. And he does it in such a way, for instance, I thought I played like a great drum part, and then Terry will always come back and go, "Oh, that was good, Mark, but you know what? I think we could do a little bit better, or try this a little bit." So it's just a not only an honor, but it's such a wonderful ability to work with Terry.
And your music has got a Rush influence. So does this Rush influence come from Terry, or is it your own musical inspiration?
I'm the one in the band that kind of gets a little sensitive about this. Other than the first record, maybe there was more of a hint of a Rush influence there, but I really believe since Fence to Clear On, we moved beyond that. I guess maybe some things, because we're basically a three-piece band with a vocalist, because the music is generated from three individuals, maybe that's what kind of gives it that sound. We don't have a second guitar player or a keyboardist or anything like that. But I really believe that, especially since Fence to Clear On, that we kind of moved away from that sound. But I guess people generally like to compare, when they hear something new, they like to compare it to things that they've heard. So if they want to compare us to Rush, then hey, I'll take that. Rush is an amazing, great band that's been around for over 40 years.
Of course.
If we can achieve that, then I'm all for it.
Well, and I think some of it falls at my doorstep, because during my formative years as a guitar player, I really took a liking to Alex Lifeson's chord choices, the suspended chords and the open string. And so I think a lot of that contributed, obviously, because it's identified very closely with Alex. And the fact that, like Jeff said, we are essentially a three-piece band, and we have a busy bass player and a busy drummer. And the ironic thing, of course, is that when Jeff first joined the band, he couldn't even play any Rush songs. Obviously, he had heard of Rush, but he was more of a Chris Squire, Yes fan, or King Crimson fan, and Steve Harris and Iron Maiden. So it's almost like what Jeff brought with him in his bass playing came from a lot of the same influences that influenced Geddy Lee, as far as we know. John Entwistle and who was the guy in Cream? Jack Bruce. So, Jeff catches a lot of heat sometimes for being reminiscent of Geddy, but he comes from kind of the sources that Geddy came from. But we have been kind of sensitive about it, like Jeff, because we certainly don't have any objective to copy Rush and sound like them. And I think over the years we've shed some of those more obvious type connections. It certainly didn't help a band like us to work with Terry Brown, who, now that we've worked with him so many years, we can hear where a lot of those Rush sounds came from, the distorted bass or the sound of the drums, or kind of Terry's perspective with putting the song structures together. Because like Mark said, he's involved in all aspects, where when we do pre-production, he'll say, this 2 minutes is, I'm losing the song, you're going to lose the listener. I think you should take this out. I think you should move this section here and there. And so, he weighs a pretty strong influence on everything. And I don't think Pretending to Run probably could have happened without Terry or someone of his equal skill level, because we were throwing so much into the arrangements. He had to tell us when enough is enough, and he edited some things out where we were the song started to get cluttered. So, a producer of his caliber is always keeping an eye on the big picture and essentially saving us from ourselves if we're starting to lose the plot. So that's a probably longer answer than you wanted, but
no, very, very interesting. So, but your music is very complex, but it's got very catchy melodies and accessible vocal lines as well. So it's a good combination between complexity and accessibility. So is it the musical recipe of Tiles?
I would say it's really developed into that. Easy, Jeff. The music on this particular record is a little bit more complex. The melodies, with us adding so much more to it, even the melodies got more complex. But I think they were more
user-friendly. The listener could really focus in with a little bit more. Thank you, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Where am I on my page here? It really isn't, as far as we don't really go by a recipe with it. It's as each song is written and put together, and like we were talking about, Terry is instrumental in letting us know what might work a little bit better, or maybe we're going too far with a certain phrase, or whatever it may be. Working with bringing in Matthew Parmenter and Mark Michael, that was also, like I was saying earlier, it was a lot of fun to do because it was something different for us. Really took us out of what we had normally done or what we're comfortable with, and adding the vocal textures and the background vocals. It just it made it really expansive.
Oh yeah.
Well, as far as a recipe, I think everybody likes melody, and even progressive rock bands who may go on 5-minute instrumental excursions, you want the listener to come back and have melodic content. So, like so many bands, I don't think we're necessarily original in that regard, because you look at Spock's Beard and Neil Morse, and it's kind of the perfect marriage of melody and complexity, where you're not being so complex that the average music fan can't latch on to the melody and still enjoy more complicated or instrumental music.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so Pretending to Run, it's your 6th studio album. So how would you assess your musical progress over all the years and albums? What you say, are you better now than maybe in 1994, or so musically and as a band, or is it not possible to say?
I definitely think that as a band we've grown. If you listen to the first album through this, there is a progression. Sense to Clear and Presence of Mind maybe were kind of similar, but between Window Dressing and here, it's been very experimental. We throw everything at every song, and we do what we think is best for each song. Window Dressing as an album, it was our first real attempt at trying to do things very differently, whether it was adding different layers of things that we hadn't done. We recorded differently than we had before. And with this album, it's that on steroids. I mean, we didn't hold anything. Nothing was held out. If somebody thought that a conga section needed to be, or a conga bit needs to be there, then we at least tried it. There's a lot of stuff that's on the B-roll that people won't ever hear, but we tried everything that we could to make the songs interesting from one song to the next. We really wanted the listener to listen to a song and then wonder what was coming next, is really what we tried to do.
Yeah, and this has happened, yeah. And so, it's a very demanding artwork as well. So, has your interesting artwork of this new album? Was it Hugh Syme, or was it yourself, your idea? How does this artwork, this cover, was created?
That's all Hugh Syme. He's the man, but I'll let Chris tell you about it.
Yeah.
Well, when Hugh really liked the title "Pretending to Run," and I think you've seen, because Hugh has done our covers since Presence of Mind, and he did Window Dressing and Flypaper. He did our 2 live album covers off the Floor 1 and 2, and actually, just so your listeners know, because we keep talking about how we don't try and be like Rush, yet we hire Terry Brown, and then we go ahead and hire Hugh Syme. So what I'll say is that we did not want to hire Hugh Symes because of yet one more connection to Rush. But Terry was so enthusiastic about the Presence of Mind album that he said, you've got to deliver artwork that's just as
Stellar.
as good as what he thought the music was. So we reluctantly relented, only just because of the Rush connection. But obviously, working with Hugh has been a great experience, and he comes up with the greatest covers that help translate what's going on in the music.
Yes.
And the concept and the album title, and it's just very interesting for the listener. And with Pretending to Run, he immediately presented to us the idea of the turtle.
Mm-hmm.
And it started out because, a turtle can only pretend to run.
Yes, of course.
And so that was kind of his first thought. And, he's very easy to work with and very creative, and he allows us input. At least he listens to our input before he says no.
Thank you.
So
Good, yeah.
it's a very interesting relationship. And you don't work with someone like Hugh to tell him what to do. You hire him to work his magic and come up with stuff that's really appropriate and interesting for the album. But we had a couple different covers. The turtle was on the escalator, so the turtle is kind of running away. He's heading down the escalator.
Yeah.
He's only running in the sense that he's running away because he can't literally run. After all, he's a turtle. And at first we had a man walking up the upper end of the escalator to kind of show the direction that the turtle was running away. And we kind of liked the man. It brought a little bit more than just the plain escalator on the turtle. And then Hugh introduced the young girl who's extremely unhappy that her pet is running away. So we as a band were pretty divided. Half of us liked the girl, half of us liked the man. So the interesting story is that once we finally got serious this fall about finalizing the artwork, all of a sudden Hugh sends us the cover, and it's got the girl on it. Well, we had decided, because it was a hung jury, that we weren't going to have either the girl or the man. It was just going to be the turtle on the escalator.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Hugh decided that the girl needed to be on the escalator to show that there was, some conflict and tension going on within the story Pretending to Run, and he felt that just a turtle on the escalator wasn't quite enough to convey what the story inside was about. So that's kind of how that worked out. So I was in trouble with the guys because I was one of the people that liked the girl. And so all of a sudden they're like accusing me, because I do most of the communication with Hugh, giving him the lyrics and liner notes and stuff. So they suspected that I pulled a fast one on him and told Hugh to go ahead with the girl and not the guy. So so anyway, yeah, it's great artwork. And there's a lot of fun stuff in the booklet if you look real close.
Yeah.
You'll find Terry snuck in there somewhere.
Yeah,
and lots of things for people to kind of ponder as you work your way through the songs and get more familiar with the actual story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really great artwork. And yes, we discussed this issue before, but there are many breaks between your studio albums. And one way you have to start again, because you make great albums, but if you have got a long time between these releases, then you have to start again. So what's the reason for the long periods between each album release?
Well, I was going to say that really the longest breaks we've had were between Presence of Mind and Window Dressing, and then between Window Dressing and Flypaper, I think those each had like between 3 and 4 years. But there was a lot that had happened between that and some of our personal lives and things like that. And then with Pretending to Run, this was the longest by far, but we did put out 2 live albums in the interim, the Off the Floor 1 and Off the Floor 2. And we did those because it was coming up on our 20th anniversary and those kinds of things, and Pretending to Run was not ready to go. So our thought was to have some kind of show of our anniversary in 20 years, which is a big deal, with the original band, the original lineup. We thought we would take a break from Pretending to Run and look at maybe doing these live albums as a way to say, hey, it's been 20 years and here's a collection of our songs, not just taken off the CDs and from the tape, but to present them in a live way that maybe would be different than, because we can't call anything a greatest hits collection. So our thought was, why not do songs that we've played over the years and present them in this new live way? So, and that stuff all, we put those out ourselves, and we did all that work, and with some local people here as well. But, we had to decide what we wanted to do, and so, I mean, that's really one of the reasons I think Mark wanted to talk a little bit more about it.
No, that pretty much answered everything. It's just, we got done with Flypaper, and we were expecting Flypaper to really take off, and it didn't quite get the traction that we had expected. So, we spent a year after Flypaper just kind of trying to get our balance back, like, well, where we want to go, what do we want to do? Do we want to do another album? Are we going to stick together or what? So then we started writing again, and that's the writing sessions that turned into Pretending to Run. And like Jeff said, in the interim, because we had our anniversary coming up, we put out Off the Floor 1 and Off the Floor 2.
And 2, it shouldn't, Chris might kill me here, but, Chris had, his parents both died within 6-7 months of each other, and, obviously you can't come back from something like that.
Of course.
And we all, as a band, we needed to give him his time and respect that he needed, and with his family, and so that was the right thing to do. And whatever amount of time that he needed, and there was no pressure, there was nothing. We were just here waiting when he was ready to get back at it. So that's some of that time. Obviously not all that time, but some of that time was needed for that kind of stuff too.
So I guess Tales is not it's your passion, but you have to do other jobs to earn your livelihood, I guess.
Oh yes, we all had to spend a lot of hours outside of playing music, taking care of regular jobs to make the ends meet. So. There's and to fund the project. A lot of this we have to fund ourselves, so it takes quite a financial commitment.
Of course. And if you will go on tour, you will go on tour soon. So will you perform most parts of Pretending to Run live? And do you have a special visual concept for your shows?
Our visual is our drummer in a thong. And no, I'm kidding. That's not a good visual. But no, our idea is always to promote and play as much of the new album that we can. But we do, with knowing that there's no way we could Presenting to Run in its entirety, at least yet at this point. What we would probably do is we will mix some of the older material and do a large swath of the new album as much as we could in the time allotted.
Okay, yes. And I read that you were discovered by Gene Simmons of Kiss. Is that right?
Well, that's
That's true. Mark and I were in a band that was kind of the precursor to Tiles, and we had done a demo tape with a different singer and bass player. And that demo tape actually got in the hands of Gene Simmons, and he signed us to his label at the time, Simmons Records. So because that band wasn't really together anymore, he said, well, you know, who wrote the songs? And I said, well, I wrote the songs. And he said, well, that's good then. So go ahead and, you know, put your band back together and let's get rolling on this. The problem was this was in the early 90s, and it was kind of the very first shake-up with labels consolidating and going out of business. And unfortunately, Gene was unable to get a new distribution deal for Simmons Records, and we never actually put out a record. But the experience of, because we met with Gene, we had a contract with him, and it was a very important and motivational experience, you know, early on to have someone like Gene Simmons
Of course.
I like what you're doing. And, you know, the thing about Gene Simmons that was so weird was that he's this big closet progressive rock fan. I mean, we all know, well, maybe he's not a closet progressive rock fan, but you wouldn't expect it with his normal musical activity. But, you know, everyone knows by now that, you know, part of Rush getting off the ground was their touring in 1975 with Kiss.
Mm-hmm.
And so Gene Simmons is a very diverse individual, obviously, and he really liked progressive rock. And at that time, Queensryche was taking off, and he was kind of in tune with, you know, tracking down progressive rock bands that captured his interest. So it really, I don't know that personally I would have done anything beyond what Mark and I had done with that original tape we put out in, I think it was 1990, because, you know, the band didn't really stick together, and we didn't know if anybody'd be interested, because we were doing this kind of progressive rock at a time when grunge was here in the United States. Bands like Alice in Chains and Nirvana and Soundgarden, that was the big movement. And so Gene Simmons, to come out of the woodwork like that, was a very motivational boost, and it's really what prompted us to actually go ahead and form Tiles.
Mm-hmm. So are there further some things to be mentioned that I have not asked right now? So do you?
No, we really appreciate your time with us, and you know, thanks for the interest in the album for sure. We really appreciate it.
Yes, you were.
Thank you.
You were frequently played, even the last years, from Window Dressing and Fly Paper. I picked some songs. Capture the Flag is a great song. I really love that song, and others as well. So I was very excited to hear that you are still existing. So my consideration was this band does not exist anymore. They did some kind of best-of albums, and that's over now, but it's great to see you again and hear you again. So thank you for this nice interview.